My name is Cassandra Blackwell, and I'm 34 years old. I never imagined I'd have to protect my inheritance from my own family. But here I am, not just defending my finances, but the legacy of the only woman who ever truly believed in me. It started with a text. Tuesday afternoon. I had just finished reviewing a high-risk audit report for a multinational client when my phone buzzed on my desk. The sender? Dad. Family meeting this Saturday, 2 p.m. at the house. Important estate matters. No explanation. No warm hello. Just a summons. I stared at the message, already feeling that familiar weight settle in my chest, like a knot slowly tightening. In our family, important estate matters was just code for Damien's in trouble again, and you're the solution. Another Blackwell crisis? Nina Torres, my best friend and colleague, leaned casually against my office doorframe, sipping iced coffee. She could read me like a forensic report. I turned the phone toward her. Guess who's dragging us back into the dysfunction? She arched an eyebrow. Let me guess. Damien blew through another poker streak and now your parents want to liquidate the world to fix it? I didn't answer because that was exactly what I feared. Girl, you know I love a good family circus, she said with a sardonic grin. But isn't it a little suspicious they waited over a year since your grandmother passed? And now they suddenly want to talk inheritance? That word stung. Inheritance. Grandma Vivian's legacy. 16 months earlier, when my grandmother died, it was like losing the only person who had ever truly seen me. While my parents were busy coddling Damien, the golden boy, Grandma Vivian was the one who taught me how to think, how to build, how to protect what mattered. Her home on Whidbey Island, her investments, her extensive art collection, they weren't just material things. They were part of something greater. Her belief in me. She had made it very clear that I would be her primary heir. And though the legal process had dragged due to the complexity of her estate, the final transfer of assets was scheduled for next month. So why now? Why the sudden meeting? I've been hearing things, Nina said carefully. Jason from Forensic Compliance mentioned seeing Damien at Emerald Bluff Casino, and not at the penny slots. My heart sank. Are you sure? She nodded. Every other night, apparently. Private rooms, high stakes, champagne service, the works. I closed my laptop. Well, that tracks. The last time he was this reckless, Dad mortgaged their house to bail him out. That was what, 5 years ago? 7, Nina corrected. When he swore he was starting a real estate firm, it lasted all of 4 months. I swallowed a wave of nausea. Grandma's estate, Vivian's house, her stocks, her priceless art, could be on the chopping block. Again. And I wasn't about to let that happen. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my dining table, surrounded by manila folders and digital spreadsheets. Unlike the rest of my family, I had copies of nearly every legal and financial document tied to Grandma Vivian's estate, because she had insisted I keep them. You're the only one I trust to protect it, she once told me. And something was wrong. Small inconsistencies in the quarterly reports. A change in the appraisal request on the Whidbey Island property. And most concerning, a request logged last week to transfer the custodianship of one of the estate's secondary accounts. A request I never made. That's when the chill fully settled in. This wasn't just a family meeting. It was a heist. They were planning to take everything she left me, everything she built, everything I promised to protect. And they had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead. The next morning, before even brushing my teeth, I called Elliot Chang, my grandmother's estate attorney. Cassandra, he said warmly when he picked up. I've been meaning to reach out. There's been some odd activity around your grandmother's accounts. My blood ran cold. I was hoping you could clarify something, I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible. Have my parents requested any documents or made inquiries recently? He exhaled. Your father contacted us 3 times in the last 2 weeks, claimed you had given him verbal authorization to review the portfolio allocations and property deeds. I absolutely did not. I assumed as much, Elliot said, which is why I didn't release anything. But it does raise concerns. I was already grabbing my coat. Can I come in? Today? Of course. 20 minutes later, I was in Elliot's paneled downtown office, sipping stale coffee from a porcelain cup, staring at a folder thick with call logs and printouts. Elliot's assistant had documented every attempt Martin Blackwell had made to get access. Worse, there was a note. Caller asked if Whidbey Island estate has been reappraised for potential sale. Sale? I nearly dropped the cup. That property was sacred to Grandma, I said. She made me swear I'd never sell it, that I'd preserve it for future generations. I remember, Elliot nodded. She amended her will twice to specify that intention. Cassandra, this isn't just careless curiosity. This is maneuvering. I clenched my jaw. I think it's more than that. I think they're trying to take control of the estate, legally or otherwise. You might be right, he said gravely. Before leaving, I signed a formal request for full internal audit logs of all estate access. I needed to know exactly who was trying to get their hands on what, but I wasn't done yet. Next, I drove to the office of Greg Wallace, the family's longtime accountant. I hadn't spoken to him since Grandma passed, but he'd handled my parents' and Damien's taxes for years. He looked nervous when he saw me. Cassandra, I wasn't expecting you. Hi, Greg. I'll be direct. What's going on with my family's finances? He hesitated, smoothing his tie. Your parents asked me not to talk to you until after Saturday's meeting. Greg, I folded my arms. This isn't just about estate planning anymore. It's about attempted interference with legal distributions. You don't want to be on the wrong side of this. He sighed and gestured for me to sit. It's complicated. Try me. Damien's in serious trouble again. I'm talking close to $500,000 in gambling debt. And it's not just casinos anymore. Some of it's darker. Private lenders, illegal ring. The kind of people who don't send overdue notices, they send enforcers. I blinked slowly. So my parents want to use my inheritance to pay them off? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Are they planning to sell anything yet? Greg opened a drawer and pulled out a folder labeled Family Trust Restructure. I recognized my father's handwriting. They plan to transfer all of Vivian's assets into a new trust, with themselves as trustees. You'd be listed as a beneficiary, in name only. The liquid assets would go first. Investment accounts, marketable securities. Next would be property reassessment on Whidbey Island, and finally, he paused. Finally what? He slid a sheet across the desk. It was a catalog of heirloom items from my grandmother's personal vault. An emerald brooch, a tanzanite necklace, French gold cufflinks from the 1890s. They've had preliminary offers from private buyers, Greg said. All hush-hush. My head spun. This wasn't just betrayal, this was looting. And the worst part? My parents were counting on one thing, that I'd do what I always did. Keep the peace. Avoid conflict. Sacrifice for the family. But not this time. This time I had something they didn't expect. A plan, and a lawyer who didn't take prisoners. I didn't drive home. I drove straight to the office of Layla Romero. We'd crossed paths once at a financial compliance conference in San Diego. Back then, she'd been a keynote speaker, razor sharp, terrifyingly precise, and known in legal circles as the go-to for asset protection when your own family becomes the threat. She answered my message within 30 minutes. When I walked into her high-rise downtown office, I felt like I was entering a war room. Minimalist decor. No soft edges. Layla herself stood to greet me, tailored navy blazer, black heels, iPad in hand. I've read your message, she said. Sit. Start from the beginning. I laid it all out. Vivian's estate, my parents' schemes, the files Greg had reluctantly shown me, and Elliot's warnings. The secret appraisal, the forged authorizations, the plan B they were ready to launch if emotional manipulation didn't work. Layla didn't blink once. Here's what we're going to do, she said, typing as she spoke. We establish an irrevocable trust with you as both grantor and beneficiary. That trust will be immune to outside influence. Your parents will have no legal standing to touch what's inside. They're already trying to move everything into a fake family trust. Let them try. They're about to find out what happens when they bring a butter knife to a tank battle. For the first time since this nightmare began, I exhaled. How fast can we do this? I asked. Layla glanced at her calendar. If we begin now, I can have documentation drafted by tomorrow afternoon. You'll need to contact your grandmother's estate executor to start asset transfers before the meeting Saturday. 3 days, I said. She nodded. Tight, but doable. You'll have to act fast. I stood. Then let's get to work. The next 48 hours moved like a covert operation. Elliot Spencer expedited all paperwork. The moment Layla had the trust documents ready, we began reassigning title ownership on the investment portfolio. I signed so many transfer forms, my wrist cramped. Vivian's Whidbey Island property deed was updated and filed with the local county clerk. Now under the trust's name, permanently shielded from liquidation. The last step? The one that sent a chill down my spine? Retrieving the heirlooms from the family's safety deposit box at Harbor Coast Bank. The box was legally in my name, thanks to Grandma Vivian's will, but the bank manager had known my parents for over 30 years. If he made a call, the whole operation could unravel. I walked into the bank Friday morning dressed in a fitted blazer and heels, calm, confident, untouchable. I'd like to access box 823, I told the clerk. She smiled. Of course, Ms. Blackwell. One moment. I signed the log and followed the branch manager to the vault. Each step echoed like a countdown. The moment he turned the key and stepped aside, I felt the weight of 3 generations fall on my shoulders. Inside were velvet pouches, sealed envelopes, a lacquered jewelry box wrapped in tissue paper, and nestled in the back corner, a small leather-bound journal, Grandma's handwriting barely visible on the spine. I stared at it for a moment, breath caught in my throat. Everything all right, Ms. Blackwell? I blinked. Yes, just remembering. I signed the removal form, loaded everything into my shoulder bag, and walked out of that vault like I was carrying a nuclear launch code. Because in a way, I was. By Friday evening, Layla, Elliot, and I met in her office for the final review. All accounts transferred? Dantiar, sir? Layla asked. Elliot nodded. Confirmed. Trust is funded and secure. The house deed was recorded this afternoon. The bank assets are now legally shielded. You did it, Cassandra. I sank into the leather chair, exhausted, wired, furious. Tomorrow, I said, they're going to try and corner me. Layla looked up from her paperwork. Let them. They won't know they've already lost until it's too late. Elliot leaned forward, a rare smile tugging at his lips. Your grandmother always said you had iron in your spine. She was right. I didn't feel like steel. I felt tired, hollow, betrayed. But I also felt something else. Prepared. I opened my phone and read the message again. 2 p.m. Saturday. Important estate matters. I smiled coldly and whispered, Let's talk about estate matters then. Saturday came wrapped in sunshine and silence, the kind that usually means a storm is coming. At 1:45 p.m., I pulled into the long, familiar driveway of the Blackwell family home. A white colonial-style house with black shutters and a porch that had seen decades of family barbecues and fake smiles. I parked next to a sleek silver Jaguar, Damien's. Funny how gambling addiction never seemed to touch his taste in cars. I sat in the car for a moment, watching the sunlight filter through the old oak trees, remembering the times I'd walked up those same steps thinking if I just played nice enough, I'd finally be seen. Appreciated. Not today. Today I wasn't here to be agreeable. I was here to finish what Grandma Vivian started. The front door opened before I even reached it. My mother, Claire, stood there, all smiles and pearls. Cassandra. Finally, we were wondering if you'd changed your mind, she said with sugary concern. I stepped inside. The living room was staged like a courtroom. My father, Martin, sat in his favorite armchair, a leather-bound folder in his lap. Damien lounged on the couch, pretending not to care, but fidgeting just enough to betray his nerves. Water? Coffee? Dad offered, standing as if we were about to conduct a board meeting. I'm good, I said, choosing the high-backed chair opposite them. Strategic placement, equal distance from all of them. My mother fussed with her sweater before sitting next to my father. So, darling, we wanted to talk about some important decisions as a family. Here we go. Martin cleared his throat and launched into his performance. As you know, your grandmother's estate is nearing final distribution. It's time we looked at the bigger picture. How best to honor her legacy by uniting everything under a single family trust. He slid the folder across the table toward me. Your mother and I would serve as trustees. That way we can ensure Damien gets the help he needs, and the rest of the estate remains protected for all of us. I didn't touch the folder. Claire jumped in. Think of it as a safety net, dear, for everyone. Damien's going through a difficult time. Difficult time? I cut in, calm but sharp. He owes $500,000 to people who break bones for fun. Damien flinched. My mother froze. Martin pressed on. We're all aware of the severity of the situation, which is why unity is more important than ever. Once you sign the papers, we can move quickly to resolve everything and ensure the estate doesn't get entangled in unnecessary legal red tape. I looked him square in the eyes. You mean you want to liquidate Vivian's investments, sell the Whidbey property, and pawn her heirlooms to save Damien again? Damien scoffed. You make it sound so dramatic. Is it not? I asked. My father's voice tightened. Cassandra, this is not the time for sentimentality. The estate technically belongs to you, yes. But morally, it belongs to all of us. Actually, I said, pulling out my own folder, it legally belongs to a trust, as of yesterday. Martin's smile faltered. What trust? My mother asked, her voice cracking. A private, irrevocable trust, I said. I'm the sole grantor and beneficiary. The investments, the Whidbey property, and all heirlooms were transferred into it. Legally. Permanently. You could have heard a pin drop. My father blinked. You went behind our backs? I stared at him. You mean like trying to forge authorization documents and file an illegal trust restructuring behind mine? Claire's face paled. Plan B didn't work, I added. Neither will this little meeting. Martin stood suddenly, the lawyer in him roaring to life. You manipulated the estate? No, I interrupted. I protected it. From you. Damien rose to his feet. You selfish. Do you know what'll happen to me if I don't pay them? I know, I said coldly. I also know it's not my job to keep saving you from consequences you've earned. My mother's voice cracked. Cassandra, please, you don't understand the pressure we're under. Yes, I do, I said. I've lived under it my whole life. I've been the responsible one while you poured every dollar, every ounce of attention, every sacrifice into Damien. And now that Vivian left it to me, you still think it belongs to him. Martin pointed a shaking finger. We'll contest this. We'll go to court. You'll lose, I said. My attorneys are ready. I have documents. I have witnesses. I even have a letter from Grandma, handwritten, predicting this exact scenario. They stared at me, stunned. This isn't about money anymore, I said, rising. It's about boundaries, and today you learned I have them. I turned to walk out. Claire grabbed my wrist. Please, he could die. I looked at her hand, then at her. So could I said softly. But none of you ever worried about that. I walked to the door, each step louder than the last, and for the first time in years, I didn't look back. I thought I'd feel triumphant. After everything, after standing my ground, outmaneuvering their manipulation, walking out with my dignity intact, I thought I'd feel powerful. But sitting in my car, hands trembling against the steering wheel, the only thing I felt was grief. Grief for the family I wished I had. Grief for the brother who never grew up. Grief for the parents who chose enabling over healing, control over trust. And above all, grief for the truth I could no longer ignore, that I had always been on my own. I didn't cry. Not yet. I drove, aimlessly at first. The downtown skyline passed in a blur. Then the lake. Then neighborhoods I hadn't seen since childhood. I finally stopped at a small park near the marina and parked under a tree. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But some strange instinct made me swipe. Hello? A pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard since I was 15. Cassandra, this is Caleb Blackwell, your uncle. My brain scrambled. Uncle Caleb? I. How did you even get this number? Elliot Spencer gave it to me, he said. He thought you might need to know what's really going on with your parents. I sat up straighter. What are you talking about? Can we meet? His voice was low but steady. There's more to this than Damien. A lot more. We met the next morning at a corner cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist. Caleb looked older. Gray hair, weathered skin, but there was something gentle in his eyes. Something I hadn't seen in any Blackwell in a long time. You look like Vivian, he said softly as we sat. She would have been proud of what you did yesterday. I narrowed my eyes. You already heard? He gave a sad smile. Your father called me last night in a rage, said you were tearing the family apart. That's usually his way of saying someone told him no. I didn't respond. I was still stunned he was even real. I thought you were cut off years ago, I said. No one ever mentioned why. Oh, I was, Caleb said, stirring his coffee. Because I refused to cover for your father's bad financial decisions. Same story, different decade. I stared at him. You mean this has happened before? Caleb's smile disappeared. Let me get to the point. Your parents are broke. Not metaphorically. Not almost. Flat. Broke. My stomach twisted. But they live like they used to, he cut in, which is different. They're surviving on credit cards, second mortgages, and illusions. They remortgaged the house twice in the last 5 years. Your dad's law firm is bleeding clients. He's barely making payroll. I sat there, stunned. And that's not all, Caleb continued. They also took out 2 unsecured loans using Vivian's name while she was in hospice. Claimed it was temporary, just to float until the estate cleared. My blood ran cold. Are you serious? He slid a folder across the table. Inside were loan agreements, property liens, and emails between Martin and private lenders. My father had leveraged the Blackwell name and legacy as collateral. If those loans defaulted, which they were on the verge of doing, criminal charges weren't off the table. I don't understand, I said. Why didn't they just tell me the truth? I would have helped with that. Not Damien's mess, but with this. Because it's not about the money, Caleb said. It's about control. Your father has spent his entire life needing to be the provider, the patriarch, telling you he failed, that he needs his daughter's help. That would break him more than bankruptcy ever could. I shook my head, overwhelmed. So this whole thing with Damien wasn't just about saving him, Caleb said. It was about using him as a shield, a distraction. Make you feel guilty enough to sign away the estate so they could fix everything without ever having to admit they screwed it up. I leaned back in the booth, feeling like the wind had been knocked out of me. They were going to use Grandma's assets to cover up years of bad decisions, I whispered. Yes, Caleb said. And once they had control, they would have sold off everything, house, investments, heirlooms, just to keep the illusion going another year. I looked at him, heart pounding. Why are you helping me? Caleb smiled sadly. Because Vivian asked me to. After she changed her will, she told me everything. She knew this might happen. She said if they ever came after you, I was to give you these. He slid another envelope across the table. Inside was a handwritten letter in Grandma Vivian's familiar script. My dearest Cassandra, if you're reading this, they've done what I feared. I'm sorry. I tried to prepare you, but there's only so much I could say aloud. What I gave you wasn't just money. It was trust. In you. In who you are. And in who you'll become when the moment comes to stand alone. Don't let them guilt you. Don't let them shame you. And above all, don't let them win. Love, Vivian. Tears stung my eyes. Caleb rested his hand on the table. You've already done what she asked. Now the question is, what will you do next? By Monday morning, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to war. I was going to end the war. I picked up the phone and called my father. He didn't answer, so I left a voicemail. Dad, we need to talk. Properly. This Thursday. My place, 5 p.m. Bring Mom, bring Damien. This time you'll listen. Then I called Layla and Elliot and even Caleb just in case. This time I wasn't walking into their house, their rules, their trap. They would come to mine. And this time, I'd control the room. The condo was quiet when they arrived, one by one, stiff and hesitant. Damien was the last to walk in. His swagger was gone. His skin looked pale. His eyes were hollow. It was the first time I saw him look more like a scared little boy than the smug son my parents had always adored. We sat in my dining room. Around the table were my parents, Damien, Elliot Spencer, Layla Romero, and Caleb. All of them stunned silent for a moment, like they hadn't expected me to actually prepare the battlefield. I began calmly. Before we go any further, let's clarify something. I turned to my parents. This is not a negotiation. The trust is active. The assets are secure. The estate is beyond your reach. That part of the story is over. Martin's jaw tightened. Claire looked ready to cry. Damien stared at the polished wood of the table. But I'm not here to punish anyone, I continued. I'm here to offer a solution, say, a real one. The kind Grandma would have given, one based on truth. My mother shook her head. You don't understand. I do, I said. Caleb told me everything about the loans. The second mortgage, the forged signatures, the fraud under Grandma's name. My father's face flushed. You had no right, I said sharply, to gamble her legacy on a lie. The room was still. Then Damien broke the silence. I didn't know about the loans, he said, voice barely audible. All I knew was I was drowning, and everyone wanted me fixed. I looked at him carefully. Do you want to be fixed, Damien? Or just bailed out again? His throat moved in a hard swallow. I want help. I just don't know how to want it the right way. That was the most honest thing I'd ever heard from him. I exhaled. Then here's how this works. I opened a folder and slid 3 documents across the table. 1, a treatment agreement with a 90-day residential facility near Spokane. 2, a financial counseling plan prepared by Layla for my parents. 3, a non-disclosure agreement tied to my willingness to help, though, but not from the trust. From me, personally. I'm willing to help, I said, on 3 conditions. They all stared. First, I said, turning to Damien, you check into this treatment center tomorrow. No excuses, no disappearances, no fake progress reports. I'll pay for it, personally. But the moment you miss a session, funding stops. He nodded slowly. Okay. Second, I said to my parents, you open your finances to Layla, every debt, every account. She will help you consolidate and restructure. But you must sell the house, and you must sign off on a spending freeze for 6 months. My father opened his mouth to protest, but Layla cut in. If you don't agree, we report the forged loans to the proper authorities. My mother gasped. You wouldn't. I would, I said flatly, and I'd be in the right to do so. My father stared at me with something that looked almost like fear. Third, I finished, you don't ask me for another dollar. Not ever again. The trust remains untouched. This is your one lifeline. Use it wisely. There was a long silence. Finally, Damien nodded. I'll go. Claire reached for my hand. Cassandra, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how far we'd fallen. You didn't want to see it, I said gently. But now you have to. My father remained silent. Then slowly he gave a short nod. The pride was still there, but the armor had cracked. Caleb leaned back and smiled. Vivian would have loved this. A proper reckoning, Blackwell style. As they left that evening, Damien lingered behind. I don't deserve this, he said quietly. I looked at him. No, but you might earn it one day. And for the first time, he smiled. Not that arrogant smirk. A real smile. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of the wraparound porch at the Whidbey Island house, watching amber leaves drift down from the trees like old memories finally settling. The renovations were complete. The roof, restored with reclaimed wood. The porch railings, painted the same shade of sea gray Grandma always loved. The windows cleaned until the glass looked invisible. It was quiet, peaceful. And for the first time in a long time, I was too. I sipped my coffee and checked my phone. A text from Layla. Final estate review signed and filed. It's all officially closed. You did it. Another from Nina. How's the solitude treating you? Ready for margaritas yet? I smiled and typed back. Maybe next weekend. Still unpacking, emotionally. Because these last 6 months weren't just about saving assets. They were about rebuilding boundaries. Damien had completed his 90-day treatment. He now worked part-time at a marine rehabilitation center. Humble job, modest pay, but steady, honest. He still sent me updates every Friday. Proof of his GA meetings, notes from his sponsor, photos of rescued seals. No more excuses. No more manipulation, just effort. My parents had sold the family home 2 months ago, downsized to a 2-bedroom condo near the lake. They were still adjusting, still resisting change in some ways. But the reckless spending had stopped, the facade had cracked, and finally, some light was getting in. Even our conversations were different now. Fewer guilt trips, more quiet honesty. Progress, not perfection, and me? I had never been more clear, more grounded. I'd taken on fewer clients at work, started therapy again, even reconnected with Nathan, my ex-husband, over coffee. He'd always said the problem wasn't me, but the way I carried everyone else's damage. Maybe now, I was learning how to put it down. That afternoon, I wandered into the house's library, the same room where Grandma used to read with her feet tucked beneath her, sipping peppermint tea. I hadn't touched the desk drawer since the day I moved in, but something nudged me. I opened it. Inside was a velvet pouch I hadn't recognized. Tucked inside was her emerald necklace, the one she wore every holiday, every graduation, every major family event. Wrapped around it was a folded piece of paper. My hand shook as I opened it. Her handwriting. Curved, precise, unmistakably hers. My darling Cassandra, if you're reading this, then you've found your way to the house. I knew you would. And I knew the road to get there wouldn't be easy. I want to say something clearly, in my own words, without lawyers or witnesses or formal documents. I chose you. Not because you were perfect, not because you never struggled, but because you listened, you observed, and most of all, you didn't give up on yourself. Even when others tried to make you feel small, you were always the quiet one, the responsible one, the one expected to endure. But I saw your strength. And I built this legacy for you not just to protect, but to transform. Some legacies are property and paintings, but the best kind? They're made of boundaries, courage, and clarity. You already had them inside you. I only made sure you'd have the tools to use them. Whatever happens next, remember this. Sometimes protecting the future means being the villain in someone else's story. That doesn't make you wrong. It makes you strong. And if one day you feel alone, come back to this porch, you'll always be home. All my love, Vivian. I sat in that chair, tears slipping silently down my face, the necklace warm in my palm. It wasn't just about the money. It never was. It was about finally realizing I didn't owe anyone my silence, my compliance, or my sacrifice. And in the end, the inheritance Vivian left me wasn't just locked in deeds or dollar signs. It was a permission slip to choose myself. The air smelled like salt and cedar as the sun dipped below the tree line. I had set the table on the porch overlooking the shoreline, just as Grandma Vivian used to do for our summer dinners. The lanterns glowed soft amber. The wine was chilled. The playlist? Old jazz from her vinyl collection, now digitized and preserved. This wasn't just dinner. It was a statement. That the house was not for sale. That the legacy was intact. That the chaos had passed. For now. My parents arrived first. Claire brought a store-bought lemon tart and too many napkins. Martin looked stiff in a pressed shirt he hadn't worn since the last holiday photo. They looked older, softer, and maybe just a little less in denial. Beautiful view, Dad said, avoiding eye contact. I didn't change much, I replied. Vivian got it right the first time. He nodded, then silently set the wine bottle down. Damien came next. He looked different, healthier. His face was fuller, his hands steady. No jewelry, no expensive shoes, no false bravado. He brought a bottle of sparkling cider and a bag of hand-picked apples from the orchard where he volunteered on weekends. "Thought I'd contribute something," he said, almost sheepish. "You just did," I told him. Caleb arrived last with a bottle of scotch that looked like it came from the year I was born. "Your grandmother always saved this for the right occasion," he said. "I think she'd say this counts." As we gathered around the table, there was a moment of awkward silence. 6 months of separation had changed us, fractured what we knew, etc., but maybe, finally, made space for something better. Claire lifted her glass first. "To family," she said, voice trembling. "To growth," Caleb added. Damien raised his cider. "And second chances." I looked around the table, at the people who had betrayed me, disappointed me, exhausted me, and somehow I felt something close to gratitude. Not because they'd changed completely, but because this time they chose to show up honestly. "To boundaries," I said quietly, clinking my glass to theirs, "and to never sacrificing yourself just to keep the peace." That earned a short laugh from Caleb. "Sounds like something Vivian would have said." "She did," I replied, over and over. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I stood on the porch alone. The house was silent again, but it didn't feel empty. My phone buzzed. A name flashed across the screen. "Nathan. Still up?" "Just finished the conference in Vancouver. Thought I'd drive down the coast this weekend. If you're around, maybe we could talk." I hesitated, not out of fear, but because this time it would be my choice. Not a distraction, not a rescue. Just possibility. I typed back, "Drive safely. I'll be here. Porch light's always on." I set the phone down, stepped inside the library, and opened the drawer that now held every letter Grandma ever wrote me. And beneath them, a blank journal with her monogram embossed in gold. I opened to the first page and began to write. This is what I inherited. Not just a house or stocks or priceless heirlooms, but the clarity to say no, the strength to stand alone, and the grace to still leave the door open. This legacy doesn't live in vaults. It lives in choices, and I finally made my own.